Restoring men in history, Constitution, censorship, First Amendment, they're all important to you and your freedom. So you got the freedom side, the anti-freedom side. Federalist.com, censorship. Vida Duffy Alfonso wrote a great article because we love the Constitution here. We want to restore the Constitution. So let's talk about this censorship issue and the First Amendment. These House Republicans, or we could call them uniparty members because they're really with the uniparty and the anti-freedom side. So it's the uniparty anti-freedom side. Voted to fund CISA's criminal censorship and election interference. Vida Duffy Alfonso, September 30, 2023. And there's a big image of green censorship. Censorship is used for what? Power, control. I like this first line she writes. Good job, Evita. Anyone who votes to fund an unconstitutional agency, and we agree with this, and this is how we should be selecting and voting for candidates. Are they going to be unconstitutional candidates or constitutional candidates? Are they going to defend and uphold the oath of the Constitution or not? We get too focused on the personal life. Are they protecting the Constitution or not? Anyone who votes to fund an unconstitutional agency that works to annihilate the First Amendment does not deserve to hold office. Let me say it again. Anyone who votes to fund an unconstitutional agency, and we agree with this, that works to annihilate the First Amendment does not deserve to hold office. Let's look at politicians. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, share. We would appreciate it. Thank you. When you look at anything, are they upholding the Constitution or not? Because these affect all of you in America. They do an unconstitutional act, it affects all of you. They break the Constitution, it affects all of you. What they do in their personal life may just affect 2 people. What they do with the Constitution affects millions. That's a great line. Let's go on. 109 Republicans voted against an amendment proposed by Representative Andrew Clyde that would strip the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency of 25% of its funding. That's all, 25%. They couldn't even do that. So 109 uniparty people, we'll call them Republicans here because that's what they were. They were in name. Really, Republicans were always big government. After all, they did the Patriot Act. So 109 Republicans, uniparty, voted against an amendment proposed by Representative Andrew Clyde that would strip the cybersecurity and infrastructure of 25% of its funding. CISA, a subsidiary of the unconstitutional Department of Homeland Security, which needs to be ended peacefully, has made a habit of censoring the American public and interfering in our elections. Now let's read that again. Interfering in our elections, your elections, taking your choice away. By how? Policing your speech. We need an open debate in America. That's what the First Amendment gave you, the ability to disagree with the what? Federal government. And we need that. According to federal lawmakers, CISA is the nerve center of federal government censorship. CISA's intended purpose is to prevent cyber attacks and defend the physical infrastructure of the country. However, beginning in the run-up to the 2020 election, the agency pivoted its focus to what? From foreign threats to what? Domestic threats of so-called what? And these names are always funny. Mis and disinformation. Code words for information deemed inconvenient to the state or the state power, right? If the state wants to retain power, it can't have you talking. It's got to control that narrative. CISA mind control. I like that, mind control. In true Orwellian fashion, CISA officials use illegal powers to suppress information that they know to be true in order to preserve official government narratives and control what? Your mind. In addition to addressing mis and disinformation, CISA directs the censorship of malinformation. Look at all these words they use. And the agency, of course, has a definition for this. She defines it, defined by the agency as information based on fact, but used out of context to mislead, harm, or manipulate. In other words, malinformation is factual information that is objectionable, not because it's false or untruthful, but because it's provided without adequate context. In other words, we want to control the narrative. We want to control your mind. We want more. What do they want more of? Power, control, money. So you got to take that First Amendment away, knock it down. No Constitution for these power. Explain lawmakers on the House Select Subcommittee on the, quote, what? Weaponization of the federal government. What was the First Amendment? Congress shall make no law respecting, let's put it up. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. So you interfere with a social media company, you're what? Abridging freedom of the press, freedom of speech. That's the federal government breaking what was written to protect you from the federal government. It's unconstitutional. And that's your federal government breaking it constantly. We've seen Missouri v. Biden Twitter files. You see it over and over and over to people. It's up to you to share this information and get it out so that we can have an impact and make a difference in the world and protect and defend the Constitution. It's up to the people in the states to defend the Constitution, the state legislatures, the governors. That's the check on abusive federal government power peacefully. All right. So, Congress can make the law. Does that include the executive? Absolutely. Supreme Court? Absolutely. They cannot abridge the freedom of speech or of the press. They cannot abridge the freedom of speech or of the press. And they do it. So, we need to restore the Constitution, right? The agency justifies censoring truth. They always have a justification, right? Because it claims to be, quote, protecting the Americans' public's cognitive infrastructure. What's that mean? Cognitive infrastructure. We're going to get to that. We're going to put the lady up here in a second. In the lead up to the 2020 election, CISA began treating speech critical of American institutions as a threat to said institutions and the infrastructure of our country. Threat to their, what? State power. That's what it is. Speech critical of American institutions. That First Amendment was written so you could be critical of the federal government, and we must protect it. You can disagree with the federal government. George Mason and those guys wanted it in to protect you and your freedom of speech because they knew what? Freedom of speech is important to your freedom and your children's freedom and your grandchildren's freedom. And it's important that we protect this, that America continue to be that shining city on a hill that people come to that we love. Former CISA director Chris Krebs, who served during the 2020 election cycle, cracked down on speech that called into question the integrity of the election. Now watch, by deeming it as a threat to election infrastructure. So they interfered in the election, calling you openly speaking about it, election interference. That called into question the integrity of the election. So if you had said before the election was about to happen, you don't believe that mail-in ballots are safe. You're just having an idea, you know, and if you've read, you know that that is true. That is accurate. That's accurate. If mail-in, there's more fraud with mail-in balloting. That's just fact, proven. All right, let's go on. Today, current CISA Director Jen Easterly has expanded the agency's efforts of securing institutional infrastructure, securing cognitive infrastructure. They've got to click in here. Let's click in and watch it.
The most important critical infrastructure there is our cognitive infrastructure. And so building that resilience is, part of the mission set, in my view.
So Jen Easterly has expanded the agency's efforts of securing institutional infrastructure, securing cognitive infrastructure, or put differently, your minds. They want to control your minds. They want to push their narrative and control it. According to Easterly, Americans' cognitive infrastructure is the most critical infrastructure the state must protect. Why? Because the state's got to protect its power and increase its power. And it keeps doing that. And that's why you must protect the Constitution and defend it peacefully. Because it's important to your freedom and our freedom. It's what makes America, America. What Easterly really means, though, is not that the public's minds are critical to protect, but that the public minds are critical to what? Control. If you want power, you got to control what? The First and Second Amendment, and that's speech. Because you might have a great idea and win in the marketplace of ideas. And in ideas defeat the federal government. So they can't let that get out. Meeting with the tech giants. Watch this bad stuff. Missouri v. Biden revealed that ahead of the 2020 election, CISA agents facilitated meetings between big tech companies and national security and law enforcement agencies to address mis, dis, and malinformation. Notice all the terms they make up. On social media platforms, as the election drew closer, CISA increased the frequency of these meetings. Of course, getting more serious. They got to increase those meetings, increase the interference, do anything to increase their power, protect their power. Now notice you got the federal government directly breaking the First Amendment. Directly breaking what? The Constitution that was meant to protect you from the federal government. So this is serious, ladies and gentlemen. During the meeting, CISA warned tech companies of potential foreign hack and leak operations that would threaten the integrity of the 2020 election. The valid Hunter Biden laptop story was subsequently censored because it was falsely portrayed as a hack portrayed as a hack and leak operation. Polls after the 2020 election indicate that had the Hunter Biden laptop story not been suppressed, Joe Biden might have won the 2020 election. We've talked about that. We've gone over that. Directing censorship. CISA, along with other government agencies, engaged in switchboarding. What's switchboarding? She goes into it here. She turns it down to the process of directly forwarding offending social media posts to tech companies for them to censor. Think about that. Think about how dreadful and unconstitutional that is. And the point is, do we want a constitution or not? Who's it up to? You, ladies and gentlemen, it is up to you to protect and defend the Constitution peacefully. CISA, along with other government agencies, engaged in switchboarding, the process of directly forwarding offending social media posts to tech companies for them to censor. Offending whom? Offending the power of the state, the power of the federal government, which the First Amendment was directly meant to protect your free speech from. The federal government interfering in it. And this is serious. And it's important to your freedom and your children's freedom. If you want your children to have freedom and you want freedom, you must, and I'm calling on all ladies and gentlemen, Tara, to protect and defend the Constitution peacefully. Many of these posts included tweets that called into question the integrity of the 2020 election. Look, we need to be able to debate what happened, or you won't have faith in the election, which is good for a tyrant or a totalitarian, right? Because then if people don't believe in it, many start dropping out. But you've got to vote, folks. You've got to vote and volunteer and give money and stay engaged. They want you to disengage. They want you demoralized. Who's they? The powers that be. People over here, the anti-freedom people that want your freedoms, that want everything, that want it all, that want more. CISA particularly targeted citizens. Now watch this. You're supposed to be protected. Get how serious this is. The First Amendment is supposed to protect you from these people in the federal government, constitutionally. CISA particularly targeted citizens like you, could have happened to you, who criticize mass mail-in balloting for not being secure, and we know for a fact it is not as secure as walking in one-day voting. What we need is one-day voting, walk-in vote. On paper, that's what we need. We need one day, walk in and out, paper ballot. That's how to vote. We can do it. One day, walk in, paper ballot. For not being secure and for being disproportionately implemented to favoring Democrats, two things that are indisputably true. Mail-in balloting favors Democrats. Mail-in balloting has a lot of fraud. And we knew that, right? We knew going in. People were asking me, and I kept saying, well, there's going to be a lot of fraud. There's going to be a massive amount of fraud. And we know now. We knew with the mail-in balloting there would be massive amounts of fraud. Called that. Indeed, in his May testimony to the House Homeland Security Subcommittee on Oversight, Federalist Senior Contributor Benjamin Weingarten detailed how CISA, quote, called for swift removal of posts. This is amazing. CISA called, First Amendment, can't abridge, freedom of the speech, freedom of the press, called for swift removal of posts and continued monitoring, ladies and gentlemen, this is serious, of users' account because said user had claimed that mail-in voting is insecure. You got to take that down. Who wants power and more when they take things like this and willfully break the United States Constitution that protects you? An important document that makes America different and unique. Makes it the place you want to come to. Makes it the place you want to have children in. That conspiracy theories about election fraud are hard to discount. Well, we saw it close down right in front of us, so it's probably difficult to handle when we knew it was coming, right? But you got to stay engaged, and you have to vote. You've got to volunteer for people, and you've got to keep engaged because the powers that be want you disengaged and out of it. That's letting them win. Outsourcing censorship. CISA collaborates with non-governmental censorship organizations to outsource its speech policing and circumvent the First Amendment. Well, they do it direct and indirect, but they do this too. For example, and I like these names again, like the Committee for Public Safety in the French Revolution. Was it there to protect the French people? No. The Election Integrity Partnership, EIP, a private anti-disinformation. Notice these words, anti-disinformation. They're the disinformation organization. They're the ones shutting down speech. They're the ones for power and control. Was conceived by, ostensibly, probably, was conceived by and created in consultation with CISA officials in the run-up to the 2020 election, explained Weingarten. EIP's goal was to fill the critical gap created by the Constitution's limits on government agencies censoring election misinformation originating from domestic sources within the United States. So we know what they were probably doing, right? Censoring election misinformation originated from domestic sources. Okay. That lack of authority may have included both an inability for government agencies to access social media platform data as EIP did, as well as a very real First Amendment questions. Now get this. For example, the Election Integrity Partnership, a private anti-disinformation, was conceived by and created by whom? In consultation with CISA officials in the run-up to the 2020 election. Why did they do that in the run-up to the 2020 election? Were they trying to control it? Of course, right? 2, was conceived by and created in consultation with CISA officials. Why are they involved? They're not supposed to be abridging freedom of speech and freedom of the press. And here they are setting up an organization to do that. Limits on government agencies censoring election misinformation originating from domestic source. So if we don't like the information to keep state power, we're going to censor it, right? Translation. If we're going to lose a little power, we're going to stop it. If someone's making a good argument, we're going to shut that down. If someone's putting out information that's going to hurt our candidate that we've chosen to win, that we can control, we're going to shut that down. Probably what they were thinking, maybe, right? Quote, the lack of authority may have included both an inability for government agencies to access social media as EIP, as well as the very first real First Amendment. EIP lobbied tech companies to establish more oppressive content moderation policies. It flagged offending content and even entire narratives. Imagine that. They flagged entire narratives that the organization deemed harmful to whom? To you? No, to them, right? To their power. Ultimately, EIP was created to suppress, quote, speech dubious of an unprecedented election given the sweeping pandemic-driven changes made to the voting system. In translation, we don't want to lose. We want to make sure we control that election, right? Whereby the razor-thin final results in key states did not materialize for days. Think of how close it was. Trump got the most votes ever for a Republican ever in history. And think of, with all the mail-in foolishness, how close the margin of victory is with all that mail-in foolishness was. Meaning, you know. EIP also has several partner organizations, one of which is called Graphica. Now they keep going. A Manhattan-based tech firm revealed by a Mint Press investigative report to have been at the forefront of the establishment attack on what? What do they have to attack? Your ability to get information, alternative media. Graphica has produced reports labeling outlets that are critical of the federal government as, and what do they always do? National security, foreign powers, Russia, Chinese, Iranian influence operations on America's social media. So interesting. So imagine a company that would be set up to interfere in the election that calls out real information that would give you the ability to vote better. Election interference, right? Essentially, Graphica exists to produce propaganda for the federal government's propaganda, such as the deep state lie that the Trump campaign, remember this one, was infested with Russian assets and promoted by the Russian government. Remember all that? Went on forever. CISA is an affront to the Constitution. Yes, it is. It is a criminal organization that, along with the entire, and here's what she's saying, post 9/11 surveillance apparatus, hey, think about the Tyrant Act, has no right to exist, the unconstitutional Tyrant Act, which the founders would have been opposed to, most of them, almost all of them, probably all of them, every single one, but definitely the majority. They definitely would have not ratified that. Let's put it that way. It would have not been ratified. Has no right to exist in the United States of America. That is right, ladies and gentlemen. It is up to you to talk about this, to bring it out to everybody you talk to, everybody you encounter. Bring this up. That's your job. That's your mission. Reducing CISA's budget by 25%. That's all they were going to do, is the least Republican uniparty members of Congress can do to address this wildly abusive and, I like this, unconstitutional agency. And that's what we need to be looking at, ladies and gentlemen. Is it unconstitutional or is it constitutional? Go with the Constitution. It protects your freedom. And it's important that we protect and defend peacefully this United States, this great, lovable Constitution. Even for selfish reasons, Republicans should be motivated to eradicate CISA. Well, they're a uniparty. So it makes sense that they would have been against Donald Trump, right? Because Donald Trump wasn't going to war. He wasn't serving the military establishment. He wanted to protect the border. He actually wanted to have sovereignty in America. He wasn't afraid to call out China. The agency interfered in the 2020 election to hurt Republicans, and its censorship operations are inhibiting efforts to fix the problems that plagued the last election. So the agency interfered in the 2020 election to hurt Republicans, and its censorship operations are inhibiting efforts to fix the problems, and that should concern you. The integrity of the 2024 election is, we believe, in serious trouble. She believes that too. Perhaps, however, like CISA and its supporters in the Democratic Party, Republican members of Congress do not think that the American people can discern for themselves what is true and not true. I think it's possible that really you've got the uniparty, and you've got the freedom and anti-freedom uniparty, and that includes Republicans and Democrats. And if they're for power or prestige, going to a party or whatever it is for that's motivating them, they seem not to care about the Constitution in any way and freedom, your freedom, and they seem not to care about you, right? When they vote like this, it's not caring about you, the people. It's possible, and that's how we have to vote. Again, look at how they vote, and that's easy to judge, right? You can see how they vote. Is it a constitutional or unconstitutional vote? You can see that. You can see their voting record. You don't have to look in the past or whatever's going on. An unconstitutional act will violate the Constitution for millions and millions and millions of people for decades and decades and maybe forever. Is it possible? It's possible that these 109 representatives do not care about the oath they took entering. Yes, that's right. It's possible they do not care about that oath of defend the Constitution. So who's it up to? You. And agree with CISA that the federal government must protect our minds. Protect the state power. Control your minds. As the saying goes, with friends like these, who needs enemies? And that's the uniparty, ladies and gentlemen. There's the freedom side and the anti-freedom side, and you got to choose every day, the constitutional side or the anti-constitutional side. Constitution protects your freedom, protects your children's freedom. Do we want a constitution? Why do we need it? To protect your ability to disagree with the government, to protect your ability to defend yourself, and et cetera, et cetera. Join us. Come over to the freedom side and the constitutional side. Get away from the uniparty. If you like this video, please like, because that really helps the algorithm to like and subscribe. Thank you. Protect and defend the Constitution peacefully.